If you own a Harley-Davidson, avoiding a few common mistakes can save you thousands in repairs. In this countdown, we cover 8 habits that can seriously damage your engine, transmission, and overall performance. From misunderstood maintenance practices to costly riding mistakes, these tips go beyond basic advice and reveal the mechanical errors that shorten your bike's lifespan. Number 8. Never run aftermarket exhaust without a fuel management tuner. This is probably the single most common mistake I see with Harleys that come through the shop. A rider buys a set of slip-ons or a full 2-into-1 exhaust system, bolts them on in the garage over a weekend, fires it up, and it sounds absolutely incredible. And then they ride it like that for the next 2 years. Here is the problem. Your Harley left the factory with a specific fuel map, calibrated to the back pressure created by the stock exhaust system. When you open up the exhaust, you reduce that back pressure significantly. Now the engine is pulling in the same amount of fuel, but the exhaust gases are exiting much faster. The result is a lean condition. Your air-fuel mixture shifts lean, and your exhaust gas temperatures climb. On a Milwaukee 8, this is especially critical because these engines already run hot from the factory. A lean-running M8 will see exhaust gas temperatures north of 1400 degrees on the rear cylinder during sustained highway riding. That is enough to start burning exhaust valves over time. I have pulled heads off twin cams and Milwaukee 8s where the exhaust valves on the rear cylinder were visibly eroded, pitted around the edges, and no longer seating properly, all because the owner ran open pipes for 30,000 miles with no tuner. The fix is simple. If you change your exhaust, you need a fuel management device, a Power Vision, a Thunder Max, or at a bare minimum a fuel pack module. You need to remap the fuel tables to compensate for that change in airflow. Otherwise, you are slowly cooking your engine from the inside, and you will not know it until you have a misfire, a dead cylinder, or a head that needs valve work. $1,200 to $1,800 just for the rear head alone. Now we step into the next chapter of the list. Number 7. Never use automotive motor oil in your Harley. I cannot tell you how many times someone has come to me and said they run the same Mobil 1 full synthetic in their Harley that they put in their F-150. Here is why that is a terrible idea. Your Harley-Davidson has a wet clutch. The engine oil, the transmission, and the primary all share lubrication duties depending on your model, and on all big twins, the engine oil also lubricates the transmission gears. Automotive oils are formulated with friction modifiers. These are additives specifically designed to reduce friction between metal surfaces in a car engine. That is great for your truck. But when those friction modifiers hit your wet clutch plates, they do exactly what they are designed to do. They reduce friction. And now your clutch starts slipping. It might not be obvious at first. You might notice it pulling away from a stop under load, the RPMs climb, but the bike does not accelerate the way it should. Or you notice it in higher gears under hard acceleration. That is your clutch glazing over, because the friction material is being coated with additives that were never designed to be near a clutch pack. You need a motorcycle-specific oil that is JSO MA or MA2 certified. That certification means the oil has been tested and confirmed to be safe for wet clutch applications. It will say it right on the bottle. Harley's own Syn 3 oil works fine. AMSOIL makes a V-twin specific oil. Mobil 1. Racing 4T is JSO MA2 rated. Redline V-twin is excellent. Just make sure whatever you use says JSO MA or MA2 on the label. If it does not say that, it does not belong in your Harley, period. Now we arrive at one of the most interesting examples. Number 6. Never ignore the cam chain tensioner shoes on your twin cam. If you own a twin cam engine, specifically the 88, 96, or 103 produced between 1999 and 2006, this one could save your engine. Harley used plastic cam chain tensioner shoes in those early twin cams. These are the guides that keep tension on the chain that drives the camshafts off the crankshaft. The problem is, the plastic material they used breaks down over time. It gets brittle, it cracks, and eventually chunks of it start falling off into the cam chest. Those chunks end up in the oil, they get picked up by the oil pump, and they can block oil passages. I have seen engines where the tensioner shoe completely disintegrated and the cam chain jumped, bending push rods and damaging the piston tops. On a 2003 Electroglide that came through here, the owner heard a faint rattling at idle for a few weeks and just thought it was normal Harley noise. By the time he brought it in, the rear cam chain had enough slack to jump 2 teeth. We pulled the cam chest cover and found plastic debris everywhere. Both tensioner shoes were gone, just the metal backing left. The upgrade is to convert to gear-driven cams, or, at minimum, install the hydraulic tensioner shoes that Harley switched to in 2007. If you have a pre-2007 twin cam and you have not checked or upgraded your tensioner shoes, and you are past 50,000 miles, you are living on borrowed time. This is not a maybe situation. Every single one of those plastic shoes will eventually fail. The only question is when. And here is the thing that gets people. This is not a cheap fix after the damage is done. If the chain jumps and bends push rods, now you are into a cam chest repair, plus push rod replacement, plus potentially new lifters. That bill goes from a $500 preventive upgrade to a $2,500 engine repair very quickly. Next, we look at a brand that quietly changed the game. Number 5. Never over-tighten your primary chain. I see this constantly. A rider notices some slack in the primary chain, grabs a wrench, and tightens the adjuster until the chain feels nice and snug with barely any play. This feels correct to most people because on a bicycle or a regular drive chain, tight feels right. On your Harley, it is the opposite. Your primary chain needs between 5/8 and 7/8 of an inch of free play measured at the midpoint of the bottom run of the chain when the engine is cold. That is more play than most people are comfortable with. But here is why it is critical. Your Harley primary chain does not run in a straight line. The compensator sprocket on the engine side and the clutch basket on the other side are not perfectly aligned in the same plane by design. The chain actually has to flex slightly as it travels around those sprockets. If you tighten it beyond spec, you are putting constant lateral load on the main shaft bearing inside the transmission and the compensator assembly on the engine side. Over time, this excessive tension can destroy the main shaft bearing by placing constant stress on components that were never designed to carry that load. Once the main shaft bearing fails on a big twin, the repair is anything but simple. The transmission has to come out, and in many cases, you're looking at splitting the engine cases just to access and replace the damaged bearing. Depending on the shop, labor rates, and any additional parts that need replacing, the bill can easily climb to between $2,000 and $3,000, or even more if further damage is discovered during the repair. All of that expense can happen simply because someone could not live with a little chain slack. Always check the chain when it's cold, measure it on the bottom run, and leave the recommended amount of free play exactly where the factory specifies. That slack is not a flaw. It is an intentional part of the motorcycle's design that protects the drivetrain as the suspension moves through its travel. Number 4. Never skip the primary fluid change. But the next spot belongs to something even more interesting. This is one of the most forgotten maintenance services on a Harley-Davidson. Almost every owner remembers to change the engine oil, and most also stay on top of the transmission fluid. But the primary chain case has its own dedicated lubricant that needs to be replaced on a regular schedule as well. Too many riders overlook it until problems begin to appear. On a big twin, the primary chain case houses some of the motorcycle's most critical drivetrain components, including the primary chain, the compensator, the entire clutch pack, and the starter ring gear. Every one of these parts relies on clean primary fluid for proper lubrication, cooling, and smooth operation. As the fluid ages, it becomes contaminated with clutch material, metal particles, and heat degradation, reducing its ability to protect these expensive components and increasing wear that could have been avoided with routine maintenance. This fluid takes an enormous amount of abuse because the clutch generates a tremendous amount of heat, especially in stop-and-go traffic or if you are doing a lot of low-speed maneuvering. The service interval Harley lists in the owner's manual is every 10,000 miles. I would recommend every 5,000 miles, same as your engine oil. When I drain primary fluid at 10,000 miles, it comes out black with a metallic sheen to it. That metallic sheen is microscopic particles of clutch material and chain wear. When I drain it at 5,000 miles, it comes out dark but still translucent, and there is noticeably less metallic content. The difference in clutch feel alone is worth the cost. A primary fluid change takes 1 quart of fluid and about 15 minutes of your time. We are talking maybe $15 in fluid if you use Harley Formula Plus or a quality alternative. There is no reason to skip this. Yet I see bikes come in at 25,000, 30,000 miles and the primary has never been opened. The fluid that comes out of those primary cases often looks more like thick black tar than lubricant, a clear sign that it has been left in service far beyond its intended lifespan. By that point, the clutch plates are frequently glazed from excessive heat, the primary chain has stretched from prolonged wear, and the entire system has been subjected to unnecessary stress. What could have been prevented with a simple $15 bottle of fresh primary fluid and a quick maintenance session now turns into a much larger repair bill. Instead of spending a few dollars and a little time on routine service, you're suddenly facing a $600 clutch replacement, along with the possibility of replacing additional worn components that suffered because the old fluid was left in far too long. But the next spot belongs to something even more interesting. Before we continue, everything in this video comes straight from Ride Longer, Spend Less, the complete motorcycle maintenance handbook. The full system, every step and every number we couldn't fit here. Scan the QR code on your screen to get your copy, and let's get back to it. Number 3. Never pressure wash near the intake or electrical connectors. This one catches riders every single time during riding season. You come back from a long ride, the bike is covered in bugs, dust, and road grime, so you grab the pressure washer and start blasting away without giving it a second thought. Unfortunately, that is where the trouble begins. Instead of just washing away dirt, you can end up forcing water into the throttle body, soaking the air cleaner, and driving moisture deep into electrical connectors that may not show any symptoms until months later. Those hidden pockets of water eventually lead to corrosion, resulting in frustrating and intermittent electrical problems that can linger for years. The Milwaukee 8 air cleaner sits exposed on the right side of the engine, making it especially vulnerable to a direct blast from a pressure washer. High-pressure water can be forced past the filter element and into the throttle body, where it has no business being. I have seen motorcycles come into the shop with rough idling and hesitation at low RPM, only for the problem to be traced back to water sitting inside the intake runner after an overly aggressive wash. The electrical system is just as vulnerable. Harley uses Deutsch-style connectors on many engine sensors and throughout the wiring harness. They are designed to resist rain and normal weather exposure, but they are not built to withstand water being driven into them at 1,500 to 2,000 pounds per square inch. Once that happens, moisture can work its way past the seals and remain trapped inside the connector. Corrosion slowly forms on the terminals, and weeks or even months later, the rider is suddenly chasing a mysterious check engine light caused by an oxygen sensor, crank position sensor, or another critical component sending intermittent signals. The safest approach is to wash the bike with a garden hose, normal water pressure, and a quality motorcycle-specific cleaner. If you absolutely must use a pressure washer, keep the nozzle at least 3 feet away from the intake side of the engine the electrical connectors beneath the seat and along the frame, and never point the spray directly at the air cleaner assembly. Treat the entire right side of the engine as a no-spray zone because preventing water intrusion is far easier and far cheaper than diagnosing electrical gremlins months down the road. Number 2. Never ignore a clunking compensator sprocket. If you ride a twin cam or an early Milwaukee 8-big twin, sooner or later you're likely to hear a metallic clunk when starting the engine, engaging first gear, or rolling off the throttle at low speed. That sound is usually coming from the compensator sprocket. The compensator is a spring-loaded assembly mounted on the end of the crankshaft that absorbs the powerful torsional pulses produced by the big V-twin engine. Think of it as a shock absorber between the crankshaft and the primary chain, smoothing out the drivetrain and reducing harsh impacts. Over thousands of miles, the internal springs begin to weaken, the ramps and moving components wear down, and clearances gradually increase. The clunk you hear is that worn-out slack being taken up every time the drivetrain is loaded or unloaded. The reason you should never ignore it is because a worn compensator does far more than make an annoying noise. As the internal wear gets worse, every clunk becomes a hard impact that places additional stress on the primary chain, clutch basket, transmission mainshaft, and other drivetrain components. Those repeated shock loads accelerate wear throughout the entire primary drive. I've seen motorcycles where a completely worn compensator eventually caused the primary chain to fail. One bike even arrived on a flatbed after the primary chain snapped at highway speed, briefly locked the rear wheel, and nearly threw the rider off the motorcycle. That isn't a rare internet horror story. It is something that can happen when the problem is ignored long enough. On most twin cam models, the factory compensator typically lasts between 50,000 and 80,000 miles, depending on riding style, maintenance, and how often the motorcycle is subjected to heavy loads or aggressive acceleration. If that characteristic clunk starts becoming louder or more frequent, don't simply turn up the radio and hope it goes away. Have it inspected before it turns into a much more expensive repair. Replacing the compensator requires removing the primary cover and involves several hours of labor. The compensator itself generally costs between $200 for a quality aftermarket replacement and around $400 for a genuine Harley-Davidson assembly. While that isn't cheap, it is a bargain compared to the damage a failed compensator can cause. If it comes apart completely, it can destroy the primary chain, clutch basket, inner primary housing, and other expensive components, turning a relatively straightforward repair into a $3,000 nightmare. If you're considering upgrading to an aftermarket compensator such as a Baker or Screamin' Eagle unit, take the time to research which model best matches your engine and riding style. Not every compensator is designed for the same application. Some are engineered for completely stock motorcycles, while others are intended for high-performance engines with aggressive camshafts and increased torque. Installing the wrong one can introduce new vibration, premature wear, or other drivability issues, creating more problems than it was supposed to solve. But the next example raises the stakes. Number 1. Never let ethanol fuel sit in your fuel system. And here we are, folks. The number one thing that I see cause the most widespread and insidious damage to Harleys that come through this shop. Ethanol blended fuel, which is the E10 that is at almost every gas station in the country, is hygroscopic. It absorbs moisture from the air. When your Harley sits for more than 2 to 3 weeks without being ridden, that fuel is actively pulling moisture out of the atmosphere through the tank vent. Over time, the ethanol and water separate from the gasoline in a process called phase separation. You end up with a layer of ethanol and water sitting at the bottom of your tank, right where the fuel pickup is. This ethanol-water mixture is corrosive. It attacks the inside of your fuel tank. It eats at the rubber seals inside the fuel injectors. It degrades the fuel lines, and it destroys the fuel pump. On a Delphi fuel injection system, which Harley has used for years, the internal check valve in the injectors is particularly vulnerable. When that check valve fails from ethanol corrosion, the injector does not seal properly when the engine is off. Fuel weeps past the injector into the cylinder and washes down the cylinder wall, diluting the oil film. I have had a Softail come in that sat all winter without fuel stabilizer. 5 months parked in a garage. When the owner tried to start it in the spring, it cranked but would not fire. We pulled the fuel pump module and the sock filter at the bottom was completely deteriorated. The fuel that came out of the tank was cloudy with visible separation. Both injectors had to be replaced because the internal seals were swollen and cracked. New fuel pump, new injectors, new fuel filter, tank cleaning. That was a $1,100 repair on a bike that just sat there doing nothing. The prevention costs about $8. A bottle of fuel stabilizer like Sta-Bil or Startron added before you park the bike. Top the tank off completely to minimize the airspace where moisture can accumulate. And if you can, run the bike every 2 weeks for at least 15 minutes to get everything up to full operating temperature and cycle fresh fuel through the entire system. Do not just start it and let it idle in the garage for 5 minutes. That actually makes things worse because you are creating condensation inside the engine and the exhaust without ever getting hot enough to burn it off. If you are only going to do one thing from this entire list, let it be this one, because every single Harley that sits will eventually deal with ethanol damage if the fuel is not treated. Every single one. It is not a matter of if, it is a matter of when. Enjoyed the journey from start to finish? Subscribe and catch the next one.